Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for coming on this rainy night to Japan Society for what I think is going to be a fantastic, informative conversation. Please don't hesitate to come forward, and I hope you can find your seats. I'm Merit Jano, chair of the board of Japan Society and professor at Columbia, so it's a particular pleasure for me as Japan Society chair to be here with you tonight for this conversation on the future of work and AI from US and Japanese perspectives. We have two incredibly expert and engaged experts with us tonight. Really, the impetus for this was in observing a little bit of the remarkable work of Idekoba-san as the leader of President and CEO of Recruit Holdings. He's called Deco, so I'll use that a little bit this evening if you don't mind, Idekoba-san. He's the representative director and president and CEO of Recruit. And he was previously EVP and COO overseeing business. And in fact, he has led the digital transformation of the company across numerous business areas and is a real pioneer in the digitization in bookings for travel and restaurants and other services. And I think using AI for job searches, but we'll hear more about that. And really transitioning the company and Indeed, leading the acquisition of Indeed. And he has joined us this evening, flying in especially to be with us, and I really want to thank you for doing so. It's really our great pleasure to have you with us. And joining him is Vladimir Lukzik, who is the managing director and senior partner, and indeed the global leader for tech and digital advantage at the Boston Consulting Group. And I think perhaps from that unique perspective, he is working with leading organizations, many different organizations, to accelerate the successful delivery of large-scale end-to-end digital transformation, powered by digitization, data, and analytics across numerous industries. So I want you to give them a big round of applause and invite them up. And thank you so much for being with us. Thank you. I invite you maybe over here, and Vladimir. So before we get underway with some questions, I'd like to sort of take the temperature of the room a little bit, if I may, and ask you a couple of questions, just so I have a sense of, so we have a sense of how you are engaging AI. So how many of you, just with a show of hands, are using AI in your professional or personal lives, you know, in some way beyond just glorified search functions? How many of you? Okay, that's a big percentage. And how many of you are anxious that you may not be using it optimally? Okay, not as many.
More than the users.
not as many. How many of you are worried about the risks of AI? Okay, all right, very good. And how many of you think that it might make your job obsolete in 5 years? Okay, not so many. All right. So we got a kind of optimistic.
No students raise their hand.
No students, and we do have some students, but we also have people across many industries in this room, so very much appreciate you all being here. So, you know, I've been looking forward to this conversation a lot. Advanced predictive analytics have been with us, you know, for years, but Gen AI, you know, is a very different development, and I feel it has tremendous positive potential for productivity, for innovation, but there are also enormous questions arising, and I think questions is the right word, because we have so much to learn as the technology is engaged and it's moving forward so quickly. Questions on employment, on the risks, on how to govern it, what skills are needed for the future. Some think they're existential risks in some areas. But tonight we're really going to be focusing mostly on the labor dimensions of the transformation, how this intersects with AI, and how companies and individuals are engaging it. And so I'd like to first invite Idekoba-san, who is seeing employment trends in the US, in Japan, around the world, and his own company has been really a pioneer in engaging it, to give us a perspective. And I think you've kindly also developed some slides to...
Because I'm Japanese.
No, because they say so much in so dramatically. So thank you. Please take us into how to think about these trends.
Okay. So let me introduce a little bit. I'm a CEO of Recruit Holdings, which is, we basically help people get jobs. We are making 23 hires per minute globally, and almost every month, like 350 million job seekers are coming to our services, including Indeed.com, Glassdoor.com, and Townwork. Many job sites. And what we are seeing is, of course, the AI is a big topic, and I'm going to talk about AI. But first of all, I just want to touch on this one. The labor market itself is changing a lot. So I've been saying the same thing for probably last 2-3 years, especially after COVID. Everybody asked me about rate cuts or the economy recession. But first of all, I really wanted to touch on this big trend of labor force. Of course, everybody knows that Japan is struggling because of the aging workforce. And we will be having more and more population aged 65 plus. And as probably everybody knows, that we are having more and more 65 plus aged population who is still working. And the average age of workers are going up. And also this is the demand of hiring in Japan and actual supply of labor force. And this is our prediction, but in next 15 years, Japan will need additional 11 million workers. So meaning Japan has to all in to use AI or generative AI, how to improve the productivity. Otherwise, probably, if you travel to Japan, you can realize, the most of restaurants are still struggling to hire servers, and sometimes it took time to get a beer. So, but to be honest, people don't realize that much about the U.S. because U.S. is becoming to be New Japan. And what I'm saying is the situation of the U.S. is almost like 20 years ago of Japan. And what's happening is this is a working age population in the U.S., but as you can see, last 10 years, U.S. is almost adding almost zero new working age population. And by the way, this is including all working age population, including immigrants. And so as a result, of course, the percentage of foreign-born workers in the U.S. has been growing. But more interestingly, this is the same data, but I changed the chart a little bit. January 2020, right before the pandemic, in the US, we had 163 million total workers. And as you can see, we have added 3 million workers in the US in 2024. But as you can see, almost all of them were non-native workers. So I don't want to touch on any politics, but this is very important year, especially how U.S. should handle immigrants, but this is the biggest reason why I believe we are kind of having soft landing type of situation without recession. I have said all the time, like 2 years ago, 1 year ago, it's going to be very difficult to cut rates. FRB, it's going to be very difficult to cut rate because this is more like a supply problem. In the US, we are not adding labor force. As you can see, just this one. When the economic crisis happened, 2008, 2009, US was adding 2 million, 3 million working age population every year. Meaning, if we cannot build new jobs, 2 million, 3 million, we will have 1.5% worse unemployment rate. But as you can see, even today, if you're not adding jobs, probably unemployment rate is not getting worse. That's why 2 years ago I said, hey, this is probably the US, the first time in the US we are having the situation, the financial situation, financial district is kind of decoupled with the labor market. And maybe that's why we're having soft landing type of situation. That's how I'm thinking. And probably even the worst situation, the unemployment rate can go up to probably 5.5 or 6%. It's not going to be 10% like 2009. So that's why soft landing or mild recession is the main scenario, how I'm thinking for the next 2 years. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my guess. And one more thing, that's why I'm thinking, especially in Japan, we have to all in AI, how to use it, instead of, oh my God, this is where I'm concerned about AI. And AI in the labor market, I brought some numbers, but this is the share of US job posting AI-related keywords. And as you can see, we saw the big dip actually after the COVID, but it's picking up a little bit. But as Merit said, this is more like a general AI term. And when we think about more like a specifically generative AI, the percentage of generative AI jobs are still like 0.09%, so tiny, tiny number. And meaning also it's very difficult to find out a good generative AI engineers. But it's growing very fast. And also we have been researching how AI will impact labor market. And our conclusion so far is it will still take a lot of time to replace human labor force with AI. And I was talking with the chairman of MIT in Davos this year, but what he said, it was kind of interesting. What he said is like, so far, before generative AI, human do the work and machine will do the QA, quality assurance. But now with AI, it's more like opposite. AI will do the work and human being will do the QA. I think right now, automating driving is kind of similar situation. Probably 95% it's okay, but we need to kind of check it. And I'm going to talk more about how we are using AI, but how we are using AI is almost the same situation. We probably still need human being as a supervisor. And this is more like a detailed analysis or research of how AI will impact each jobs. But still, an interesting thing is software development job is the easiest job for AI to replace. And we'll see. And one more thing, we have asked Japanese people, this is last October, 8,000 Japanese people, how are you using AI? And the usage of AI in Japan is still very low. And probably here, people are using way more than normal Japanese people. And of course, the younger people are using more, and also gender-wise, male is using more. That's the current situation. But that's pretty much it.
Thank you very much. So if I'm understanding the first part of your remarks, you're really saying, that labor market trends, we know that Japan demographics are very dramatic, but the U.S. ones are also quite significant.
Yeah, I would say all developed countries are having similar situation. That's 100%.
And when we think about AI specifically, when you have this picture of tiny percentage of actually Gen AI, those are engineers, but there's a bigger universe of sort of being able to interact with Gen AI that's more software capacity. Is that how if you thought of it from that wider lens, how do you think about the demand for AI informed skill set as against the AI engineer as such?
I think reality right now is still more like a predictive AI model is, I would say, 90% or 99% even. Generative AI is still very tiny, and most of companies are still working on large language model as a more like a building block to build a generative AI model. So of course, and there are some good open source projects are going on, but if we really want to use it as a business use, it still takes time.
Could you say a little bit, before I want to hear from Vladimir, who's got many industries that he's being exposed to, but could you tell us a little bit about how, you have been working with predictive analytics for a long time, and so here we have this step-up capability. How are you thinking and using it?
Yeah, so actually we have delivered open generative AI model for employers to help employers to write down job description. So far, more than 800,000 employers used it. And as a result, what we are seeing is that employers which use the generative AI model got 16% more applications. So, but one more important thing is most of employers, when they got a suggestion from the generative AI model, they edit it. So almost so that's why I'm saying, like, still there are some mistakes, or so human being have to check it. So that's the current situation, but it's working really well.
And can I ask you just, why is it? Is it better written? Is it more charming? Why is it getting better results, do you think?
That is a great question. We want to know it, but one thing which is crystal clear is generative AI seems to be supporting must-have type of contents. For example, salary information, location information. Human beings sometimes forgot to write down. So it's kind of good enough information. Human being can start with the foundation of generative AI model.
Well, that's such an interesting story because A, you're actually deploying it and those are significant numbers, and B, you're also illustrating where the human element is really essential to make the improvements. That's, I think, an insight that we might take forward. Vladimir, tell us what you're seeing across many different industries, and I can imagine that, and I've seen, many companies are really not sure how to deploy it, not sure whether to, feeling some urgency. Tell us, as you are leading the business group that is working with industry, what you're experiencing.
So happy to. First of all, really glad to be here, and I'm glad I'm not the guy with the slides. Being the consultant, there are usually jokes, but Deco now can make fun of me when we have meetings that I'm bringing slides, so thank you for that. But to link it to a few of the themes that were mentioned, right? The first one is, I've been doing advisory on the analytics side for the last 15 years, helping companies deploy the latest tools, the latest skills, figuring out their data plays, etc. And it really picked up since not this January, but last January, when also we met, right, in Davos, when generative AI came on the stage, and it made it accessible to everyone. So everybody said, oh, wow, if I can do this stuff now on my phone, can you imagine what the professionals that know their stuff can get done with all of this, right? So that really triggered it. And since then, so for the last 18 months, we had over 500 large programs deploying Gen AI, like Deco shared one example, right, where 800,000 of their employers that use their platform use generative AI tool to develop their submissions, right, and job descriptions. Now, you multiply that with thousands. The fascinating thing for me is not a single one of those engagements started with, can you help us reduce the number of people or get cost efficiencies? Every single one of them is, we want to keep growing, and we cannot find enough people, and we have either a lot of turnover in these functions, or cannot find enough skilled people to do some of these jobs, or we need our folks to be even more productive than they are. So that's the backdrop, and when you see the numbers that you shared, which is wonderful macro picture, that's what's behind a lot of this, right? We're just not able to supply enough of the skilled workers in a lot of the different jobs. So that would be one theme. The second theme I would reflect on is a frequent question I get is which industries are ahead from the others, right? Which industries are falling behind versus which ones are ahead? And the fascinating thing for me is if you pick any industry, there are few players that are so far ahead, and then still number of players that are so far behind. So to illustrate, when we talk about, a lot of people jump into banking and financial institutions and they say they're tech firms first. I'm sure there are some companies there that are, that the whole industry is very mature. There is 6,000 regional banks in the US only, of which 5,000 don't even have their data set up, right? They're doing none of the AI stuff, right? There's like a whole tail of companies, even in a mature industry, that are not doing that. And then I was with a company that works with fisheries in processing fish, doing some amazing AI stuff in identifying the quality of the fish real time, which is feeding real-time pricing negotiations on the markets in Japan. And so like it's happening everywhere. So depending on the company you're from, or if you're thinking through where to go, like find an industry you're passionate about, and then think about how to apply a lot of these tools and technologies that are available, because it's actually proliferated everywhere. So those are some of the reflections.
So, so you're seeing it across almost every industry you're exposed to. No exceptions? I mean,
I don't know what I don't know.
You don't know what you don't know.
I'm sure there are some where
Right.
they're not engaging, but again,
Yeah.
regardless of the region and regardless of the industry, we're having these conversations, right?
Yeah.
And even like a common thing is, in our industry, we don't have data, right? Now we're actually producing synthetic data in very specific areas, right? So
Yeah.
you can actually fill in some of those gaps, even if if you don't have it in your hands.
Yeah. So there's, there are a lot of characterizations about what's happening. I noticed the IMF came up with an analysis. The head of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, said that about 40% of the jobs of the world are going to be affected, but not uniformly, that, more in advanced economies than in emerging. And But there is this interesting analysis evolving, and I think you alluded to your own experiences, Eric Brynjolfsson at Stanford, that less skilled workers are seeing the highest productivity increases associated by reaping the benefits of AI. So, that's kind of a different narrative than the disruption job loss thesis, which I think is a source of great concern, in advanced countries. Would you both want to
Yeah,
comment?
I'm happy to get us. So first of all, it better happen given the numbers we saw,
Yep.
right? So the 30-40% productivity increases, we need them if we want to fill the gap of the numbers that Deco showed, right? So I do think from that angle, there is I hope it gets to those numbers for our collective productivity and to continue on the growth. We can have a debate, is it good to be in a growing society or not? But I prefer to be in a growing one, right? And we will need it as a set of tools. But there are things that are wickedly easy to just generalize, and the averaging matters a lot. So for example, we're doing a lot of deployments of generative AI with software engineers, for example. And we have 2 software engineers, same background, same experience, using the same tools. One's productivity is up 30-40%, others' productivity is down 20-30% and dragging down the whole team down, right? And so we went, I think I was an anthropologist by desire. I never trained, I went into computer science, but this Gen AI thing is building that back in me. So when we went and we talked to them and tried to find out what's happening and why are we seeing such a huge range, we realized that how you define their tasks and their jobs can drive the productivity or not. So for one, we gave a very specific set of tasks and said, chunk it up in the following way and use the Copilot to do that. So he managed to execute it that way. For the other one, we were more ambiguous with the task. So she was generating 50, 60 lines of code with a tool, but then it became too hard to debug, to figure out where the issues are, etc. And then she had to go to her boss, who then had to take the time to debug it and figure out what's going on, and just drove the whole team's productivity down. And so there's a lot of lessons learned, not in just how do you use them, but how do you chunk up the tasks in a way that this could be applied. So that's where I'm seeing a lot of effort going in the organizations to learn how to de-average that, and then even figure out how do you ask the questions of the tools. But I don't know if you're seeing similar things or.
Yeah, what we are seeing is, we have been trying to automate recruiters' job. We have thousands of recruiters in the company, and of course, at the very beginning, we thought, okay, let's automate it. Then we can make a lot of money, right? But we, realized, 4 or 5 years ago, oh my God, it's very difficult to automate. Period. What we needed to start is we need to, separate out each processes of human being job. And probably the same thing, if you try to start to automate somebody's job, you will realize, wow, this person is doing this. There are so many different processes. And then next thing is, okay, can we automate this part or that part, right? And then, probably, we can find that, okay, out of this 10 processes, this one process, relatively easy to automate. And also, probably for human being, it's very tiresome job. You have to do the same thing again and again and again. So what we did is we all kind of automated that how to recommend jobs for job seekers. And what we saw is basically if the one recruiter has been doing the recruiting job for, let's say, 10 years, they're good at recommending jobs. But the recruiter who started a job like yesterday, there's a big difference, of course. But what we saw is we supported with the AI recommended model which jobs should be recommended to the job seekers. And as a result, we saw the big bump of productivity of this process especially for the people who started like yesterday. So that's the mechanism how the AI kind of related technology can support the bottom productivity type of workers, I think.
And in that example that Deco shared, this is where most of the companies fail in doing what he just did, which is he described the process end to end and said, then we analyze where it will make a difference, and then they work on deploying it, right? I have examples with clients that they say, listen, we brought a process that takes 10 days down to 2 minutes. 10 days down to 2 minutes. And we're seeing 0 savings and 0 efficiencies in productivity of the whole team. What's going on? And then you come and look at the whole process end to end, and you see this was a parallel activity that was not a bottleneck for anything else, and they're not redeploying the folks that have their now free time, and they're just sitting and they finish all this, but then this is still waiting in a queue for the next task. So doing what Deco described, having a full point of view on the end-to-end process, and then thinking through where you will make a difference if you deploy technology in the right way is where the magic happens.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really, really interesting. Could you say a little bit more, Deko-san, about Japan? I mean, you said, given these demographics, Japan has to be all in. But we've just had this conversation about how in every setting, it's hard. It's hard to do it. There are different kinds of obstacles. There's, corporate culture, there's individual attitudes, there's figuring it out and problem solving, and you've got the demographics. So I think when you say all in, you're saying marry AI with other technologies like robotics. So that, how are you thinking that Japan needs to get all in, and what does that mean when you say that?
I said again, like all in. So all in is all. But what I'm thinking is I'm actually surprised that how can I say like Japanese people are actually welcoming robots and AI today way more than probably Americans or European people. Every time I talk with the Japanese folks, they're thinking like Doraemon or like a, typical like animation type of like friendly AI robots. But in the US, it's more like a Terminator. Oh my God, they will replace my job or something. So, but right now I think it's probably regulation is still relaxed in Japan, so it's probably I think it's great to support many ways to have more challenges of AI. But my only concern is sometimes Japanese are so perfectionist, and let's say if we found just one terrible mistake with AI, and Japanese 8 a.m. news, or like TV programs are like, oh, there's a terrible problem with AI, then everybody will stop using AI. That's the biggest concern. So, but as you said, important thing about AI is AI can be connected with especially the factories or manufacturing or even the service workers. So the important thing is, as Brad said, like how can we separate out the each processes? And I think relatively Japanese are good at it. And let's try to use AI for this process, that process, without any let's try it type of mentality. Sometimes Japanese cannot have it, but if they can have it, it's a great fit. And also the demographic is definitely requiring that situation.
But it's on just if I may on this one, on the perfection and Japanese culture. You asked me earlier about, we talked a bit about a few of the teams, right? So I was talking with Deco's team in Japan, and they pushed me on this thing doesn't work, right? The hallucinations and this and that, and in this process of writing this document and composing it, right? It's all over the place. Here's an example, so therefore this doesn't work, right? then we stepped back and I said, when the human does this thing, what is the approval rate of the first draft? 30%. Okay. What is the approval rate of the first draft when the machine does it? 70%. Okay. So it's huge improvement. Yes, but it hallucinates a lot. Okay. But that hallucination, is it easy to detect? Yes. Okay. So you're telling me it's much more improved and it's easier to detect when it's wrong. So why don't you use it? Oh, that's a good question. We didn't think about it that way. We just focused on the hallucinations, right? That it's off. So it's a little bit of also contextualizing, again, in those processes, like what is the improvement, right? And how do you interpret what's there, right? And if it's improving something, then use it and start evolving it and get the learnings back into the process. Those are the new things when we think about how do you trust some of this technology. It's hard to trust it at face value until you start using it and start seeing what's working, what's not, and then being part of refining it.
Maybe you could just, so we all have the same sense, when you use the term hallucinations, maybe you could amplify what that means, because, we've heard examples where, they produce a legal brief and they just make up the case law. That's one kind of hallucination where, there isn't an answer, and so they start generating, truly false examples.
Yep.
And there, the lawyer had better figure it out and check everything. So the human interface can be quite time intensive.
Yep.
Other things, it may be much more benign or much more serious. So. And people do say you can train the model to reduce the hallucination. So could you just say a little word about hallucination?
Yeah, so I think, and you're more scientific than I am, so you'll correct me when I say something that's silly. These models are trained on, you train it on a specific set of data, right? And based on that data, when you ask it a question with that context, it will, in a probabilistic way, say, given this question, the next word is likely this, and then the most likely next word is this. So I was playing with the early models with what is heavier, a pound of feathers, right, or 3 pounds of iron? And it would say it's the same, because it's trained on all the data sets that it asks a pound of feathers and a pound of iron. So this was a curveball, so it was going back to the default that they're equal in the sentences when those two words are used together. Now, you learn and you feed and you change that. Another example is with financial data, we train it on annual or quarterly reports of a company. And it's a company in a very steady industry where it's 3 to 5% is the regular growth quarter after quarter. But it had, in a period of 10 years, 2-3 quarters where they acquired someone and the growth numbers were 50-60%. But it was, 2-3% of the time. So now that's what you train the model on. Now when you ask it a question, what do you think the likely growth rate on a quarterly basis will be for this company? 90% of the time it will give you an answer, it's 3 to 5%. 5 to 10% of the times when you click return button, right, to do it again, it's going to say it's 50 to 60%. And you're going to, well, this is odd. This is obviously wrong. But it was somewhere in the data at some point, and therefore, probabilistically, it's going to happen a few times. So that's just a couple of different examples of what would be in the bucket of the hallucinations and why they happen, given how it's trained. But I don't know if you would.
Yeah, it's just a probability model. So basically, actually last week I had a Bloomberg interview. And Bloomberg interview, and I said, like, hey, I want to delegate a lot to our leaders, and that's the best way to help, innovations, and I want to be the most powerless CEO in the world. That's what I said, and in Japanese. But our team used the AI translation, and the English word is, I want to be the most powerful CEO. So, but that's the, probability model.
Yes.
Because nobody's saying, I want to be the most powerless CEO.
Yep.
As a result, okay, CEO, yes, powerful, right?
Okay, yeah. Well, that's great. So, I do want to go in a moment to invite some questions from our audience, so prepare yourselves if you would. But so when you say the opportunity and the risks, could each of you offer what you think is the opportunity and the risks?
Yeah. So again, I think what we need to think about is, the hallucination is a great example. But for example, how we are using is more like a recommendation, right? Recommendation is not a 0-1 problem. So meaning like this is definitely a mistake or this is definitely wrong. There's no like totally wrong answer. So that's why it was relatively easy for us to utilize the new technology. And so I think we need to think about, okay, there's a good fit here, but here if we used it, maybe we need to double check, triple check, then it might be a not good fit. So, but what we need to think, what we are thinking, or what I am thinking is, we need to pile up failures and failures and failures using AI new technologies. That's the best way to train ourselves. And if we are thinking like, oh, there will be a terrible mistake, I want to touch on it, then we're going to be definitely a loser. So I think we have to embrace failures and we have to keep failing till we can have a good success. That's how I'm thinking.
Thank you.
Yeah, on the opportunities, we did a bunch of studies with folks in companies where they are aggressive in deploying automation and now Gen AI. And the hypothesis was that people will be unhappy, scared, and afraid for their jobs and their futures, right? What we found was the opposite. That was the most engaged workforce, the happiest workforce, feeling most respected. So we went and interviewed a bunch of them. And the answer was like, I feel respected. I feel that my company is going to be around in 10 years. I feel they are helping me eliminate tasks and toil that I don't want to be dealing with. And so the combination of respect as well as belief that the company is doing the right things and will have a competitive advantage in the market is how it's manifesting itself when the companies like yours lean in and do it, right? For me, I think for the baseball analogy, I think we're just in the second inning of the game, right? We had 50 plus years of this math and science and the compute that was being accumulated. That was the first inning. The second inning is now when all of it is kind of at our fingertips, but there's so much ahead of us. I get excited about the scientific deployments of all of this. The scientific research is still sitting in silos without right cross-pollination. I think there's going to be a big unlock when this is deployed in the right and the safe manner out there. And then the risk for me is that we are ignorant, that we don't spend time studying and learning what it is and what's underneath that. Way to learn that is through the failures and then say what happened. And sometimes it's the data, sometimes it's the plumbing on the infrastructure, sometimes it's how it's being deployed. There's many different reasons, but the risk is that we collectively don't spend time learning what's there and then advancing it together.
Thank you. I mean, I must say, since I live partially in the university, part of the concerns that I hear in the university, are about bias and discrimination that can be embedded in these algorithms, and there's a lack of transparency. And how do we get more transparency and develop the, expectations about testing and learning? So there's that kind of concern in the world. And so a lot of this conversation has been in the enterprise context, right? And I think my own experience working, on boards, MasterCard and others of data companies, data and technology companies, they have developed, a company like MasterCard spent years investing in good governance around data. And now you put good governance requirements in a Gen AI capability, it becomes even greater that you have those internal guardrails and practices and expertise. And many companies, haven't had to develop that or at the beginning. So it seems to me we're on a long road here to get this right in a way that will make people feel confident and build trust. So I just wonder if you, before we open this up, you want to say another word or two about trust and what builds trust.
I'm happy to get us started. Like on the biases, we all have biases. I have so many biases that I grew up just because I grew up in a specific context, right? I'm seeing it now through my kids. We're planning a trip around the world this year. We'll be 2 weeks in Japan, so I'm asking them about the countries we're going to go to, and I'm like, whoa, where did you get that from, right? And it's coming from either media or the thing that they are spending time on. So we all have it in the organizations. We have biases in recruiting. When you see someone's face or a name, you're immediately prejudging, and whether you want it or not, it's just in us, right? So what I get excited about the biases with the data is I can objectively say that it has it, and I don't need to worry about someone's feelings. We can talk about it. So I'm not concerned that we're not going to be able to solve them. I think we will. Key is that you just engage on them and use it, and to the point of trust, that we use these things, that we identify these things, we put them on the table, and that we have forums in which we can discuss them and address them. Yeah.
And the practices and policies and
Correct, and that's
approaches.
both companies, but also societies, the countries, universities. Pick the unit of the environment you want to be in. It applies at all of them.
I think it requires a lot of time to have a trust for the generative AI technology, and it's going to be. What we have been seeing is we're testing many tests, but the interface, when we put the human being as an interface for customers, success rate is way better. So, but the context, what we're delivering through human being interface or through screen is the same. But they trust way more, probably too much more, human being. So that's why sometimes I'm a little bit confused. Maybe we're trusting human being too much, even if they're lying. I don't know. But I think maybe our new generation, if kids, having an AI support from the day one, they might have totally different sense of trust for human being and AI. It might be sad, but we'll see. But I think it will take time.
It will take time.
to change
Fascinating.
our mindset.
Yeah, fascinating. We're really at the beginning of this journey. So let me invite some questions, sir.
Thank you so much for this wonderful talk,
It's on.
discussion. We started this conversation talking about economic growth, need for increased productivity to solve for a labor deficit. And based on what I've heard so far, it seems like, we will still have some sort of a labor deficit because AI is right now in an intelligence augmentation pattern. Do you see this labor deficit disappearing in 5, 10, 15 years? I don't, but I'd love to hear our speakers talk about it. And the second part of that question to our moderator, you've worked in international trade. Getting to the new era of AI requires investment in people, we've seen this in organizations, and technologies across the world, right? You cannot just be, hey, US as a single entity is going to solve this, Japan as a single entity is going to solve this. One of the big challenges, decoupling, semiconductor capabilities, given the great powers world we live in. Are you seeing any consolidated effort from an international trade perspective across these dimensions, semiconductors, software, skills, labor skills, not just as bilateral agreements, but maybe trilateral agreements or larger?
Thank you. Great set of questions. Let me first over to you.
Yeah, so I think, to be honest, especially for US, when we think about deficit of labor force, AI, it will still take time to fill this gap, and we probably need, realistically, we probably need a certain amount of immigrants. But the challenge right now is, for example, in the US, 4 out of 1, 1 out of 4 healthcare workers are immigrants, and out of 5 nurses are immigrants. But 2018, 2019, we had almost zero additional, working age population. So right now we don't have a good pipeline of skilled laborers, meaning like even if we get immigrants today, like it requires nurse certificate or CDL driver's license or even car technicians. There are so many jobs, it requires kind of good amount of skill. And so I think not only in the US, probably, now all European countries are, actually having a bunch of elections in talking about immigration. But the only one difference between AI and immigration is immigrants can be a consumer, AI cannot be a consumer. So, but all countries have to think what's a good control of the balance between labor supply and demand, and what's the realistic timeline to improve the productivity of the labor force. So I really don't want to have the emotional conversation about it. Probably we have to be more realistic. What's the best way for each countries? That's how I'm thinking.
Vladimir, would you like to add on that or the second part?
Just that we don't know how a lot of this is going to play. I don't see it play out in the next 3 to 5 years. We're talking 5-10 years plus out for more disruptive things. I'm going through college tours with my kids now, and I was shocked with one fact. I almost said factoid, but my son corrected me. Factoid means it's wrong. So I thought it was a small fact. But with one fact, which is in every single one of them, like you're going through the tour, they're saying our job placement is 99 point something. I'm like, what? So that's their pitch in there. They're guaranteeing that 99% of the students there have a job coming out of it now, right? 4 years in, right? And so it just, again, underscores the backdrop we talked about, how much shortage is there, right? And that's going to continue. But we will leave geopolitics to you.
No, I'm just going to say that, I think I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to answer that question, really, professionally. And I do think that the combination of AI and other capabilities, it can be of great benefit to the developing world. And it's a question of getting it dispersed, and there are pockets of excellence and capabilities in many developing countries that can do really remarkable things. So it's a question of ensuring that happens. We don't have a policy environment around this yet, and we have obviously very different regulatory models developing. Europe is the first out of the box, as they usually are. But they're not the home of the technology. And so, is their regulatory model going to foster innovation, or is it going to just help with the guardrails? That's a big question. I think they are a better advocate for their regulation than the US is, but that doesn't mean that what gets implemented is necessarily optimal. Sometimes it's very helpful. So it's a complicated answer. And we don't have any international bodies established who are well suited for this, and I wouldn't put it in any of the bodies that we have. But, all over the world there's discussion, in Europe and Asia. There's an ASEAN new digital agreement being developed. There are AI protocols being discussed. So what an exciting moment we're in to try to figure this out. So that's too much to talk about. One last, if a quick question. Oh, over there, please. Ms. Honda, I think.
Hi, well, thank you very much for the wonderful discussions. I really, really enjoyed. I'd like to have one question. I think you mentioned AI might help to write the job description. And my question is, can AI help us to assess the skill of the candidates? If that is the case, how?
Oh, great question.
Yeah, we have been using the more like a predictive AI model to not assess, but to more like a build more like a assessment tests, and it's a very tricky question because in the U.S. especially the assessments is very regulated, and so we have to be very fair, and so it's probably not a good fit with a generative AI model, and especially again like the legal situation is not so relaxed, and I think it's a good thing actually. If a bunch of new startups are just assessing people with AI, nobody knows which is right, which is wrong. But especially in the U.S., Fair Credit Reporting Act is the so basically it's exact the same legal situation when somebody is applying a financial loan. So the job application should be treated almost the same or exact the same. So, but on the other hand, sometimes when I saw some Chinese startups are using a lot AI to assess people and rating people, it's like, wow. But I don't know. To be honest, I'm still thinking like, wow, is it really good thing or bad thing? But maybe if we realize 10 years later, wow, they're way ahead of us. And I don't know. So I'm still struggling. What's the best answer for that?
Well, I think this is, we are just at the beginning, and so we'll have to do this again. And thank you both so much for really traveling to be with us today and opening our minds and having a fantastic conversation. Please join me in thanking them for being with us tonight. Fantastic. Thank you.